Hello, guys.
Hello,
How we doing?
welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Nice to see everybody again.
Yes, even though we're not seeing you, but you are seeing us.
Yes.
No pun intended.
No, I was gonna say something else. Never mind.
That wasn't funny.
Yeah. We're only part-time comedians.
We
only
are.
when we
We're
have to
part-time
work.
comedians.
So
yes, only when we're at work.
yeah, I'm the funniest when I'm at work.
He's the funniest.
I get in trouble because I can't be taken seriously.
He's the funniest guy you've ever met before.
So what's up? We recorded last week, but
We
any
did
revelations last week?
Not necessarily. No new revelations besides your performance in this hike we went on yesterday. Want to tell us about that, Gabe?
Sure. So a year ago today, actually, this freaking guy, he took me on this hike. This actually, okay, at the time it was like really, really hard. And I will note it is extremely steep. It's almost at like a 45-degree angle sometimes. So last year,
chill, you're just hiking up a mountain to a tabletop.
This guy. Anyways, it was extremely hard last year. It was.
He almost died last year. Like
yeah, it almost killed me.
When we made it to the top, he like lay down on the floor like this
for like 10 minutes, 10, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then this guy was like, yeah, let's just have a beer. I was like,
that
what
was
the hell?
the perfect time to get a beer. It's the sense of accomplishment.
But anyways, we did it again yesterday, and it was like cake. It was
it was
a little hard, obviously.
It was not that bad.
The sun came out, and then I dyed it another way. I got this really, really bad sunburn.
Yeah, he was hiking with a tank top.
Yeah. Well, so for me, Coachella is next weekend, so I was like, let me get a tan.
Oh yeah.
I didn't get a tan. I got a sunburn. I don't know if is it visible in the camera?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You bet it is. Wait. No. It is. Yeah. It's pretty bad. You should probably put one of those pictures that you sent me on the podcast.
No way. That's
Maybe.
too revealing.
That's too revealing. He had like a trucker tan. Like it looked like he was wearing overalls or something.
Yeah. So I'm
hilarious.
struggling. It was funny because I got home from the hike. I was like, okay, did some housework stuff, took Mac out. And then I was like, I have some time. Let me take a nap because I'm a little tired. The sun usually dries you out a little bit. Took a nap. I went to sleep fine. I woke up. I was like I feel it. So I woke up. I went to the bathroom immediately. I was like, God dang it. I was burnt.
It was two completely different colors in his skin, white and red.
But
it's like the Poland.
Here's to hoping that under that sunburn, it's a little bit darker.
Maybe you
Definitely
will.
not. I don't think that's how it works, but
I
don't think you get any tanner under a sunburn.
Really?
I don't think so.
I don't know, honestly. It's not a problem that my cinnamon passion skin has to worry about.
If you get a sunburn, will it turn into?
I have gotten sunburns.
Typically turn into a tan.
Oh, that's tough. Acute inflammatory response to excessive UV radiation exposure. Wow, it's rough. If you're white, Caucasian, American, and you're watching this,
I'm not even freaking Caucasian, too. That's what's so unfortunate.
But yeah, that's what I think about like white people is like the sun can oftentimes be your worst enemy.
Yeah. Well, I know. I think I've told you
It's
before.
like being allergic to the sun.
I went to Catalina one time when I was in Boy Scouts, and there was this one kid. He got so sunburnt on the back of his calves. There's just like one day trip that you're out on canoes and stuff like that, and then you're out in the sun with literally no shade, essentially no civilization out there because you're canoeing to a different side of the island. And his sunburn was so bad, he had these like fist-sized bulbs on the back of his calves full of pus.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah. That was like one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
And he was pale, dude. He looked like vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, that's the thing with some people.
If you're that white, you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah, some people don't have the genetic material to tan. They just turn red and it's painful. Some people do, which like if you are Caucasian and you can tan, you're lucky.
Yeah.
Like consider yourself blessed by genetics because not a lot of people have that talent. Rough. Yeah. Like what we're gonna talk about. Rough.
Dogs?
No, it's just rough.
Dogcast soon?
Dogcast. What?
We're gonna do a dog episode soon.
Dog episode, yeah.
Whether Eros likes it or not.
Yeah, whether our producer likes it or not. He doesn't like dogs.
He hates us, actually.
He does. Just kidding. All right, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
So we're gonna talk about toxic masculinity. This is a concept that I'm sure everyone has heard at some point, if not talked about it, either in class, with peers, with your parents. At any point of your life, I'm pretty sure you've came across this topic. and we're gonna deconstruct the topic. We're gonna talk about its implications and how toxic masculinity sort of comes to be and how it becomes replicated through generations.
Why do you think this is important to talk about?
Why is it important to talk about toxic masculinity? From one perspective, one can look at statistics. We see that, and we're going to talk about that in the podcast. We see that boys are more likely to develop depression, to commit suicide, to not graduate high school, to have disciplinary issues. You know, there's a whole array of topics related to toxic masculinity. On another sense, I think that it's important for us to realize that toxic masculinity does exist and to talk to kids about it because it will potentially lead them to have a more healthy relationship with mental health.
Yeah, I think it's about education, which that's kind of what we're all about, right? It's like about reforming.
Reforming,
so if we
yes.
want to be able to reform the society to understand how toxic masculinity is very harmful, we can try to facilitate a better environment for the boys that we're raising, or the friends that we have, or the family members that we need to rectify, whatever, right? So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
You want
it's
to take it away?
just to facilitate peer interaction as well within boys. So we're gonna start talking about. There's this documentary that I watched for one of my gender studies class, and it's called "The Mask You Live In." And it argues that traditional masculinity is a harmful social construct instead of a biological reality. So it begins by tackling the idea that boys will be boys, because it's not true. When we say boys will be boys, we're implying that that's the way they are meant to be, and there's no change in that. By implying that that's the way they're meant to be, then we're talking purely about genetics, but that's not the case. The whole idea that toxic masculinity does happen naturally is not true, and this is what the documentary tries to tackle. The documentary talks about societal pressures that eventually cause emotional repression, mental health issues, violence, and difficulty forming healthy relationships for boys and eventually men. And it starts with the early socialization of boys. The way you grow up with either your parents, peers, teachers, any kind of family. They tell you things like, man up, don't cry, be tough. And I'm sure at some point everyone has heard that.
Yeah, even if you're not a male, like obviously a lot of men have heard this, or a lot of boys have heard these common phrases. But I'm sure even if you are, female or a woman or a girl, like you've heard these phrases be told to your guy friends or your siblings or your uncles or your brothers or whatever.
Men don't cry.
Yeah, like you've probably seen your brother like, hey, you probably seen him told like, hey, tough up or whatever. Or even like, which leads into other things. Like if you see men crying, typically you're as a woman, you feel a little bit more disdain or disgust sometimes, because it's not something you're typically used to seeing is men open up emotionally like that.
Yes.
So
Yeah, and we live in a society that highly constricts males towards emotional openness, right? Which it has detrimental consequences for their later mental health.
very deleterious.
Very, very deleterious. So another thing that we're going to talk about, and I want to put that out there from the beginning, is the use of derogatory language tied to femininity. Like, don't be a girl. You hit like a girl. Can you think of any other ways that we make insults based on feminine gendered terms?
Yeah, there's the one that we mentioned earlier, but I don't know if I want to say that. Don't be
Like, don't be a sissy boy, sort of.
sissy. Yeah, sure.
That's
The
another way of saying
SSY
it.
is
Yes. Yeah.
the suffix at the end.
Yeah, we're constantly using female terms as a derogatory insult for males.
I know comparison is a big thing too. Like, oh, you do this like a girl.
You do this like a girl,
Yeah.
yeah. That by saying that, we are implying that girls are no
inferior.
better and actually worse than men.
Yeah.
That men are on top. And male is on top, female is on the bottom. This reinforces the idea of the hierarchy view of gender and male dominance, which also tends to be detrimental for women.
Yeah, and also at the same time, while it's unfortunately, while at the same time it's putting down men, it's putting down women too.
It puts
So
down women as well. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. So, some of the consequences of toxic masculinity, as we've talked, it involves emotional repression, which leads to psychological distress in the future, depression, anxiety, and more importantly, emotional detachment. Emotional attachment is highly important to sustain healthy relationships throughout your life, whether it's with friends, family, and ultimately a loved one, like your partner.
yeah, it's really important to be in touch with your emotions the older you get as a man, because what you realize is when you start taking relationships seriously, um, women respond very very poorly if you can't like sympathize with them for things that they're talking about, or even empathize with them for how they're feeling. um, and it's highly important to be able to be in touch with your emotions in that sense. Even if like there's issues in your relationship, you need to be able to address them from an emotional standpoint as to how you feel, how it makes them feel, and understanding how it makes them feel. um, and there's a lot of relationships that go on and on and on forever, and there's just not it's not reciprocal on both sides.
Yeah. Boys are statistically more likely to be diagnosed with behavioral problems, and they're also more likely to drop out of school or never graduate high school. If if toxic masculinity was not a problem, you would not see the statistical difference in gender at a very low level of or like young level of education. If this wasn't a problem, you would see an even distribution of males and females dropping out of school. But
Yeah.
that's not the case.
No.
We, as males, we carry a certain statistical disadvantage when it comes to, again, depression, suicide, as well as, behavioral issues at school.
And even I see it so much with because I work in a high school setting, so I see it so much. Like a lot of the girls that I tutor, they're very focused on schooling and stuff like that. And a lot of the boys, they could care less. They're worried about less. To them, graduating is like the peak for them. They know once they graduate high school, they're kind of like done. But with the girls, it's like I have to do more. I'm looked at to do more, and that's kind of unfortunate.
Yes. I read this article, and it was by this women that's studied gender, gender.
Norms.
Yeah, it's sort of like gender norms. And she said something really interesting, and is that gender is not a biological reality, but a social construct that is created, enforced, and perpetuated through daily interactions and institutional expectations. She states that individuals are born sexed, but not gendered,
Huh. Okay.
which means that boys are not biologically bound to act aggressively or suppress their emotions. These behaviors are absorbed from the greater matrix of conditioning that they're born into.
Yeah.
And so I want to go back to sexed but not gendered. The difference between sex and gender, right? So sex is what you're assigned at birth. So
Okay.
you're born with male genitalia, so your sex will be assigned as male. You're born with female genitalia, your sex will be assigned as female. Gender is a little different. Gender is what you internally believe and
Or
see and
align
align
with.
yourself
Yeah.
with, right? But in society, this whole idea of gender is highly binary. You could be a male
Or the other. Yeah. One or
or
the other.
you could be a female, right? And if you're a male, you should act exclusively as males, and if you're a female, you should act exclusively as a female. Now, I will say that when it comes to the social construction of gender, males, like the way we're supposed to behave is much more strict and linear than it is for women.
Yeah. I agree. I feel
Like-
like women can be more expressionate.
Yes, but the thing is also the way women grow up. If they want to play with Barbies, they can, but if they want to play football, they can too.
Yeah.
We don't see it as such a problem, right? If they want to, I don't know, if they're into trucks and they like fixing cars, that's fine. Like we don't really put them down. We don't insult them for liking those things.
If anything, it's almost like a novelty thing. It's novel when they're doing something like that. Oh, so you're a little bit quirky or you're a little bit cooler.
That's so cool. But males try to enrolling in a ballet class. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna get bullied. So on the male side, the expectations for our behavior are much more strict and arbitrary than
Rigid.
it is for females. It's more rigid. Yes. Uh, that plays a huge role into the way that we as males construct our ideas of gender and what's acceptable for us. What do you think, Gabe?
I agree. I mean, even as a kid, I went to school at a private Catholic religious school,
Schools are also really important in this. But go
and
ahead.
you know, there was an expectation for how the boys played and acted, and you know, and were and did in school, and then there was an expectation sort of for the girls, but you know, when us guys are out playing soccer or whatever, or like swinging around on the monkey bars, girls are over there doing arts and crafts, or you know, playing in the dirt or the wood chips, you know, just like drawing around. But it was okay if some of the girls wanted to play soccer with us, or some of the girls wanted to play other stuff with us. But
It's not
it was
okay.
viewed as weird if one of the boys wanted to go sit with the girls and chit chat, or like sit with the girls and like, you know, do whatever they were doing. It's
Yes.
very 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 skewed.
I like focusing on education, especially at you know at the younger level of education when your children go into school, because school serves not only as a place where you learn about history, science, and mathematics, but school is also an education of gender.
Yeah.
It's gender school, right? That interaction you were talking about with the boys doing certain things, and the girls are okay if they do boy things, but the boys, that's not okay if they do girl things.
Yeah.
You know, quote unquote, right? This happens at essentially any school you go to. Once kids go to school, they see the behavior of peers and they replicate it. They internalize this behavior.
Yeah, it's because you're
being
so
socialized.
spongy as a child that you see something, you're like, I want to do that.
Whether it's a healthy behavior or a toxic behavior.
Yeah.
And this is also when instructors come into place, because within classrooms, we have highly biased like instructors in education, and they will pay more attention to boys for certain things and more attention to girls for certain things.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you look at classrooms and boys are usually more expected and rewarded when they are affirmative, when they participate, when they talk more. Girls tend to take more of a passive
Backseat approach.
backseat approach. And this is not just a natural thing that boys and girls do. This is the way they're socialized in schools.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at a lot of, I guess not stigma, a lot of stereotypes over the like in the past, a lot of like leadership roles are given to men, and a lot of like secretary or like side roles are given to women. And that's something that's been so normalized, but it's not necessarily the right way to do things. Like I have met some very strong, confident, really talented leader women that like they get stuff done way better than any guy I've ever met. And it's like,
And
what are they doing?
Statistically,
what?
Yeah.
And I've always thought like, what did they do to get here? But it's like, they didn't do anything extra. That's just how they are.
yeah, statistically at almost any level of field work that you see, any jobs, you'll see that it takes women, first of all, longer to get a promotion, and they're less likely to get a promotion. Now, within education, this is another thing that I studied with an essay that I wrote. The educational field, it's a field that's highly dominated by women.
Yeah.
Like, you know, most educators, or you know, a great percentage of them, are women. But once you go to the higher rankings level of education, it's like school principals, deans at universities.
All of a sudden, it's
It's highly dominated by males. Even within school, teachers, as well as just the environment around the school, they're constantly propelling males towards STEM. So science, engineering, mathematics, all of these things. And they're also constantly pushing women towards humanities, towards the more like nurturing and caring roles,
like teaching.
also like psychology is something
Yeah.
that's highly dominated by women. Cause
Yeah, it is
It's
crazy.
all about empathy, and it can also dwell into compassion and all of these things.
You like, I thought it was a joke when we had first enrolled into college, or when I had first enrolled in college.
Yeah, you see your
and
classrooms.
I thought it was a joke. Oh, only girls are in psych classes. And then I walk into these classes, I'm like, oh crap. I'm like, one of
four males, yeah.
There's like 40 something people in here. And I'm like, one of 4 to 5 guys. I'm like, oh gosh. And then as soon as you speak up about anything, like everyone's staring at you and you're like, oh gosh, did I say something to offend somebody?
Yes.
Did I offend the wrong girl or something like that? But then you realize like, you're actually more like these girls and a lot of guys. So
Yes, yes.
So-
And then the whole thing is that masculine dominance create environments where women face discrimination, harassment, and they are
Marginalized.
marginalized. Yes, it's rough. It's a rough world to be a woman trying to further your education
Yeah.
and go up in the society scale. And this is a big, massive reflection of the hierarchy, in which usually we as males we are on top, and then women tend to be on the bottom.
No, I mean, I don't like that thinking. I feel like it's not always how it was. I feel like it's more like that's a simple way to put it. I feel like it's always like men leading and women supporting, right? I feel like that's more of what it was. I don't think it's like a first place, second place.
No,
But
that's
it
what
doesn't have
become.
to. It shouldn't have to be like men
shouldn't have to
leading,
be.
women supporting. It should be reciprocal, if anything.
Now, if we want to look at it from an evolutionary perspective, which is sort of where I draw a lot of these things, back then when we were cavemen, it was usually the males, hunters and gatherers. It was the males hunting for prey,
Yeah,
and it was the women back home
and
cooking
that's
the meals,
and
making
that's
the shelters.
biological because on average, like the
it's biological,
gender difference,
right?
the sexual difference is like I think men are like 15% bigger on average
The,
than
the thing
than
is,
women.
we are no longer cavemen.
Yeah.
Like we have not been cavemen for thousands of years.
We're capable of so much higher thinking.
We are
now.
capable of so much better thinking, and yet when you look at the statistical distribution of most jobs, as well as salaries, as well as just this whole spectrum of hierarchy, we still see that males are on top.
Yeah,
We still have this idea where the males should be the providers and women should be the ones laid back at home raising the children. But we're no longer cavemen. Like our brains are bigger at this point. We have developed so much more. Another thing, and then this is where sort of Gabe takes over, is media, right? On top of the influence from peers, your parents, church, school, blah blah blah, there is media. There is a way we portray masculinity in movies.
yeah, and this is where I'll step in and try to fluff it up and try to make it a little bit easier to convey this idea. I get it's very funny because I get very stereotyped at work and everywhere I'm at. I look like this big, not very big, but I look like this stereotypical jock white guy, like very serious and sporty and stuff like that. And then I like tell people about my interests, and I like Pokemon, I like video games.
Yeah.
I do like I love the Marvel movies, or I love what they've done in the past. They've stalled out a little bit, but I'm very into those like fantastical. I'm into a lot of like fantasy of stuff like that. It's very, very stimulating for brains like mine. And one of the first things that, turned me on was in 2008 with Iron Man. And it was a global phenomenon when that came out. And everybody knows Robert Downey Jr. at this point, and Iron Man. But what I wanted to talk about is like his whole deconstruction as a character, going from a very toxic masculinity or to very toxic masculine character that was like arrogant, emotionally detached, and very like a strong womanizer, to his whole turnaround in the last movie with Endgame, where he sacrifices his life, completely overwrites who he was with the ultimate sacrifice, which was taking his life to save everybody else. But I will start with the first Iron Man. So the first point I have is, like I said, Tony is the ultimate tech bro. Billionaire playboy, genius archetype, arrogant, emotionally detached, womanizing, and proud of selling weapons his company does.
And I want to step in here because you can look at almost any movie that involves a male main character,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to superhero movies.
They're going to
In
be a
that
lot of
description, billionaire, so highly wealthy, genius archetype, intelligent to a certain level, arrogant, emotionally detached,
and STEM. He's a
womanizing,
tech.
and STEM major. Like his whole character and persona is a reflection of the values that we assign to masculinity and what we see as the quintessential version of masculinity.
Yep.
The only thing he's missing is just Hulk's freaking
Yeah.
20-pack and massive muscles.
And one
which
of the
another
things
thing you
is
see.
he's not. One of the things I will say with this character specifically, he's not very quick to anger, like men can be portrayed as
Yeah.
typically. He's pretty chill and calm and collected, but it's like a calm arrogance. You know, it's like he's calm most of the time because he knows he's smarter than you or better than you, right? But ultimately, his life is about control, dominance, and legacy throughout technology and wealth. Wealth,
Yep.
more importantly. So the catalyst for his change was his kidnapping early in the movie and injury in Afghanistan that forced him to confront the consequences of his actions, which were selling the weapons, or being in the arms development and selling industry, right? And then he had a mentor that helped him build his suit in the cave in the first movie. His name was Yinsen. The death of Yinsen and the realization that his weapons are killing innocent people spark his first shift. So there's a little bit more that go on in the first movie as to how these bad people got these weapons or whatever. But it's not super
It was so
relevant.
cool when he built his own like suit
Out of the cave.
and out of the cave.
That
and
was
escaped. I was like, whoa.
That was I know that specific moment is very much what has influenced probably the last 10 years of like film, because it's like now you're chasing an early plot, like an early plot climax that is relevant to the rest of the film without taking away from anything else. Because like he builds the first Iron Man suit, he gets out of the cave, and like he's saved. How do you top that with an even bigger and better fight? But that's more film, But anyways, growth. So the growth in that movie is he decides to shut down Stark Industries weapons division, an early rejection of toxic power. He builds the Iron Man suit not for power but for his protection. However, what you see is that he is still flawed. He hides his trauma, doesn't really communicate well, and thrives on ego and attention. And that is finalized with the very last line in the movie that says, "I am Iron Man." You know, it's him. He doesn't, because he's questioned and talked about like who is this person that saved the people of LA or whatever. And instead of like displacing it or saying, "Oh, I don't know," he says, "It's me." He doesn't want it to be anybody else. And it's more for himself because that can benefit him. And in the second movie, Iron Man 2, some of the things he struggles with are his mortality, because his arc reactor, which has, I think it's lead
heart.
or something. I think it's like the arc reactor is an electric magnet that's pulling shrapnel from his heart constantly, but something in it is like poisoning the blood. So that's one thing. The pressure of being the world's only superhero and being tasked to like solve everything, as well as the fear within himself of not being enough, which leads to his reckless behavior. So the toxic traits on display are deflection through humor, drinking, and bravado, pushes people away, especially those who care, which is his later wife, secretary girlfriendish at the time, Pepper, and his best friend, Rhodey. And his reluctance to share control. He doesn't want anybody else using the suit or any other suits he's developed.
I want to interrupt there and talk about like the fear of not being enough, because and this sort of ties into the portrayal of superheroes and males in movies. Because why? They're super wealthy, they're super strong, massive womanizers.
Yeah.
They're oftentimes very handsome, so they set up a standard that most males will never fulfill. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, goes back to the fear of not being enough. Like, when all you see around are these representations and this standard masculinity, like,
how do you stack up?
yeah, and average don't work that way. Like, this is not the average male, although that's what society wants us to believe.
Yeah.
So what happens with the people that cannot, for one way or another, fulfill this standard? Mm-hmm. And even the people that fulfill this standard, they will never be enough. And we live in a society that allows you and like makes you think that as a male, you won't be enough.
Yeah.
Huge problem with self-esteem.
So the growth in this movie is he learns to accept help, particularly from Nick Fury and his father's past. He begins to be recognizing that being a hero means taking responsibility with others, not just for others. And that ties into the first Avengers, which came out in 2012. The conflict in that movie is Tony's individualism and snark clash with Steve Rogers, who's Captain America. Steve Rogers' values of duty and sacrifice. And Stark never has played well with others and resents authority. The turning point in that movie is when he flies the nuke into the wormhole is his first act of true self-sacrifice. He saved the whole city of New York from being nuked by redirecting this nuke into space. It shows he's capable of putting others above himself, which is a direct like parallel to earlier, which in the film Steve says to Tony, Captain America says to Iron Man, "You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play," and it draws it back to that parallel, saying that he proves him wrong there. And this is one of my favorite Iron Man movies, one of my favorite movies in the film, or in the franchise. This is really where the turning point starts beginning for him, because this is where you see Tony Stark as the most vulnerable. Is in Iron Man 3. He starts dealing with PTSD and anxiety from the events of the Avengers. He builds dozens of suits. I think he goes up to like 43. He builds 43 different suits as coping mechanisms. So it's like his armors are metaphors for his emotional walls. The growth that he learns in this film is that he is Iron Man with or without the suit. With or without the first suit, the second suit, the 50th suit, whatever. It doesn't matter which suit he has. He is Iron Man with or without it. At the end of the film, he destroys all of his suits, choosing presence over his power. And that was I really, really liked that film, because I actually visited one of the towns that they filmed it in over on the East Coast shortly after they filmed it, which was really cool back in 2013, or I think it was 2012. Maybe it was early 2013. But anyways.
Were you wearing your Iron Man suit?
No, I was in my
your Iron Man pajamas?
I think I had Avengers shorts at the time. But it's really interesting, because now you're starting to see this, super toxic guy in this film, like display actual like anxiety attacks. He has a few during the film. One in the restaurant where, like, this little boy just simply wants an autograph, and he's like triggered, and he literally has an anxiety attack, and it almost looks like he's having a heart attack. That's how serious it is. And then later in the film, he's driving, he gets triggered again. He has to pull over, and like he starts panicking and breathing and stuff like that. And this is very new and different to see from this egotistical guy who everybody thought was impervious to all this stuff. So it's one of the first instances we see of him being emotionally vulnerable, or vulnerable in general, to real human struggles.
Yeah, it's interesting because the sort of like the idea of repression. You've heard about this, right?
Yeah.
Repressed feelings show themselves later in lives in ugly ways, right? The way that society conditions men to repress our feelings, then oftentimes leads males, and I've seen this in friends and other people, leads males to self-destructive behaviors.
Yeah.
So this is the idea that like males will do anything but to go to therapy.
Yeah.
We'll engage in all kinds of self-destructive behaviors.
Therapy, yeah, but like also like anything I would say anything to not be emotionally vulnerable, because like we don't go to therapy, but we're very emotionally vulnerable with each other, and we talk to each other about things that bother us or that are going on in our lives, and we open up in that way, and that's an outlet for us to be able to talk and get a different perspective, and be vulnerable in that aspect, and that's very, very important for men, for everybody.
Yes, for everybody, exactly.
The next time we see Tony is in Age of Ultron. He's got a flawed logic. Tony is now driven by fear. He builds Ultron, hoping to put a suit of armor around the world. I'm sure everybody's heard that phrase. It was very, very popular. His desire to control outcomes starts creating disaster. The themes in this movie are toxic masculinity, as fear disguised as strength. So like the suit of armor around the world, it's fear designed as strength. Tony doesn't trust others to handle the world's problems, which leads to catastrophic mistakes. And that like the problems in that film directly tie into this next film, which is my favorite film in the whole Marvel franchise, Captain America: Civil War.
Yeah,
and
really
if you remember when it came out, like it was almost like an Avengers movie. Like it was so many superheroes involved. They finally threw Spider-Man in there. The conflicts with Steve Rogers, because they've always had conflicting ideals. They have conflicting personalities. That's just always how it was. Tony supports government oversight, the Sokovia Accords, wanting structure after Ultron, because Ultron basically destroyed this whole city, and the superheroes face no consequences after that. So Tony wants government oversight on stuff that they do. He's still haunted by guilt from that event. He tries to take responsibility on a global scale. His personal downfall, which is in the end of the movie, his reaction to learning that Bucky, which is like Steve's old friend from Captain America, killed his parents, and Steve knew It's pure emotional rage. He like
Yeah.
completely lets go of himself, doesn't know how to act accordingly. The growth in this movie is begins letting go of his need to be right. He starts to see the damage done by trying to control everything. Um, yeah, that's one of the big things with Tony is that he's always tried to control everything and be very controlling.
This
And
is
that's a very
the
big thing
idea
with men
of
too.
dominance within
Yeah.
masculinity,
Huge
right?
thing with men is if like a lot of men are like, just let me take over, just let me do it. And that's not right because sometimes people can do it better than you. They just haven't figured out how to do it yet.
Or you could do it jointly with them.
Or
It's
together,
the idea
yeah.
of teamwork. And even though
It's like co-play.
even though males we play a lot of team sports
Yeah.
in general, yet we don't know how to play as a team.
Yeah.
In real life.
One of the things
Outside
that I
of
learned
a football field or outside of a soccer
in
field.
developmental psych, we talk about co-play,
Yeah.
which is when two kids just play next to each other. They're not playing with each other, but they're playing next to each other. And technically they're still playing with each other. They're just not interacting. Or they're not like the context of what they're doing is not interacting or intertwining.
Yeah.
Which is really funny. So that leads into the next film, Spider-Man: Homecoming, which Tony Stark has a big role in. Tony becomes a mentor to Peter Parker. He encourages responsibility, not recklessness, which is starting to show real growth for himself. He begins to show vulnerability and empathy when Peter is hurt. He's no longer the solo act. He's starting to teach others to rise. He wants people to be better than how he was, which is a big conflict with him. Him and Peter. Peter wants to be as good as he was, but he's trying to tell him, like, the things that I did and went through are the things that I don't want for you because they made me flawed. And that ties into Infinity War. Tony senses the threat of Thanos long before others. He's trying to balance being a father figure to Peter, partner to Pepper, and savior of Earth. The growth in this film is he still struggles with delegation, but can work as part of a team. The moment with Peter's death, which is very emotional, that scene was insane, breaks him emotionally. He's no longer emotionally invincible. And ultimately, the penultimate film, which is Endgame, it's where he starts to let go, in a sense. He, after the blip or whatever is what it's called, he retires. He becomes a father. He's finally found peace with everything. He doesn't want to risk losing it all. You know, his kid, his wife, but he ultimately chooses to help. His final growth in this film is he works alongside others without ego. He apologizes to Steve Rogers. He repairs that friendship. He's not trying to control the outcome. He's just trying to do what's right. The ultimate act of growth in this film is the sacrifice play. Tony uses the Infinity Stones to save the universe, knowing it will kill him. And the ultimate parallel in this is, see, at the end of the film, his last words are, "I am Iron Man," not as an ego flex, but as a complete earned identity. So that was obviously a journey. Now you don't need to go watch the films, everybody. I just saved you guys like 24 hours.
If you haven't watched them, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I just saved everybody like 24 hours, honestly. So the themes across his arc are he learns to open up, trust others, and let go of his control for everything. He goes from control to vulnerability. He learns how to go from ego to empathy. He begins as a man driven by image and ends as a man driven by love. And he travels from toxic masculinity to healthy masculinity. His journey dismantles the idea that power and emotional distance define strength. So this is one very, very common, like, film character that we have seen, like, particularly us, because this is like our age group, like our age, in film that is portrayed massively wrong initially, but through 2008, through a decade, they were able to completely develop his character and turn it around to make him this fully well-rounded character and show people, in a sense, that it's okay to be vulnerable. Not that it's okay to be, well, yes, it is okay to be vulnerable, that you can be vulnerable, that there is ways to, apologize to people and come to bring your problems to light and apologize for them. And all these other instances of how you can be, a better man. So
Yeah.
Kind of dragging it on at the end there.
Yeah, it's again, like this movie, as well as many other reflections of media and how they portray masculinity to be this very fixed and set trait of a fixed set of traits, right? And we as kids or adults are constantly internalizing these ideas, and it's very toxic for our understanding of gender.
Correct.
I want to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about authenticity in the spectrum or in the range of gender roles and like gender ideas in society. Why? Because if from a very young age we are constantly absorbing these ideas and expectations of gender created and sustained by other people, by society as a whole, our decisions and our expression of masculinity is completely being influenced, thus defeating the purpose of authenticity, thus defeating the purpose of me creating my own internal expression of masculinity in the way that I see fit, in the way that I see acceptable, right? So what happens? We have a billion males that want to be wealthy, emotionally repressed, muscular, and as hyper masculine as they can. So you just have just basically like a mold of a lot of different people that look exactly the same.
Yeah. And obviously that's wrong because there's just not enough room in the world for everybody to be that.
Exactly. There's not enough room in the world for everyone to be the same person or trying to be the same hyper masculine male. It's rough. It's rough. Um, this film again, it makes a really compelling case for redefining the way we see masculinity. And by that I mean that we must redefine masculinity in ways that are both emotionally healthy and inclusive for a wide range of human experiences. A cultural shift is necessary where boys and men are allowed to be emotionally expressive, empathetic, and authentic. The whole idea of emotional expression, being compassionate, being empathetic, those are all traits that are most likely or like mostly correlated with the female gender, right? These are traits that are highly towards the field of humanities as well.
But even nowadays, we see a lot of women that are, pulling away from that.
Pulling away from that, yeah. But I will say that being emotionally expressive, compassionate, empathetic, those are not just male or female traits. Those are human traits.
Yeah, that's what makes us human.
And
That's the part of the reason that we have survived so long as a species, is that we're able to be empathetic in certain situations. We're able to express our feelings.
And we're able to create relationships through emotional bonding.
Strong relationships.
So
like there's Interstellar. I mean, the theme of Interstellar is love transcends time.
yes.
Yeah, like it's one of my favorite films ever. This love literally transcends dimensions and is how the father in that movie is able to communicate with his daughter through who knows what dimension it was, but like the fifth or sixth dimension, he's literally talking to his daughter through different points in time that he's flipping through like pages in a book. So that's just an example of love.
It is. It is an example of love and how important it is for males to be taught and to be educated, to be emotionally competent and emotionally intelligent. Not just males and females alike.
Yeah. But it's important for us because we lack in these categories typically.
We must redefine the way we look, the way we educate, and the way we perpetuate ideas of gender. I'm not saying that we should not teach kids about gender. I'm saying that we should try to eliminate the negative aspects and the negative ideas of gender and keep the positive ones.
Yeah.
This idea that boys don't cry, the idea of emotional repression, completely take that away. Positive ideas, responsibility, not wanting to be a provider, but wanting to perhaps work, wanting to earn, wanting to do something out of yourself, right? The idea of achievement should be both instated in males and females, as well as all genders alike.
Yeah. That's really true because, I mean, you even seen a lot of film and media too that men or the father of the family is the provider for everybody. When things start going wrong, father figure has to start like neglecting family to make sure that there's enough money on the table and resources for the family. And he's putting like he's putting it. It seems okay, but neglecting your family at the end of the day is still wrong. Like
It is. You're neglecting them of the emotional bonding that they
yeah,
can
because
create.
now you're emotionally unavailable, which is what we talked about. For like a righteous purpose, and like that
Yeah.
righteousness is supposed to overrule like your like it's okay because you're still providing. Like no, that's not necessarily correct. You know?
Yeah. Beyond teaching males how to be males and females how to be females, we should teach humans how to be human
Yeah.
based on positive human aspects. If we seek to change an outcome in society, we must learn about and change the circumstances that lead to an undesired outcome, in this case, toxic masculinity. And then that masculinity should be for everyone, and it should be expressed in all kinds of healthy, humane ways. Because beyond gender, we must come to the understanding that we're all human again, first. And we share the same set of emotions, feelings, regardless of gender.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even today nowadays, I think what would be good to talk about is like I don't know if you have a ton of examples of um being emotionally available or like being in touch with your feminine side has like you kind of get ridiculed for it. I get crapped on a lot. So I love my family, but I grew up around a lot of women. So the people that I hung out with, my family were like my older cousins, and they're both girls or they're a few years younger than me. It's typically who I hung out with. So a lot of my coworkers, they tell me like, "Oh, you're so sassy," or "You're they say sassy. That's the big one they say, but it's like this is not like me stepping it up and being sassy. This is how I am. Like this is how I am. How I was with my mom. This is how I was with them. This is the behaviors that I learned from them. And but when they talk about it, it's like it's a negative thing because now you're like them and it's viewed differently because you're not supposed to be like them, or being into like liking certain things that are viewed as only women things or only girly things. That can be seen as negatively as well because men aren't supposed to like those things. Men aren't supposed to relate to those things. How is it that you like them? And so that's one of those things that I've always thought it was funny because it's always a surprise for people.
Yeah.
It's always
Well,
a surprise to people when you can
looks like
relate to those things.
at least you didn't grow up in a toxic masculine environment, which a lot
Yeah.
of
A
people
lot of boys did.
unfortunately do. Yes, correct. And I'm not saying that all expressions of masculinity are toxic. There are good
No.
there are examples. There are people that are raised by all men and they can still be emotionally expressive.
Yeah, one of the best things that like one of the most important masculine traits I think in my opinion is like being that emotionally available provider, like being able to be there physically and emotionally. Because that's what a father figure should be is like being there for your kids when your daughter goes through a breakup and like crying with her, but also being there for your son when he scraped his knee and like helping fix him up. Like that's like the embodiment of a perfect father right there is being able to flip that switch for your son and for your daughter. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
ideal.
that's
right
also
there.
how you create healthy attachments, and
Yeah,
attachment
exactly.
is really important. That's a whole different. We should talk about attachment.
Attachment styles.
We
Oh
should talk about
gosh.
attachment one of these days.
We're gonna
podcast.
rip open our trauma right there.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, um, there's really not much I have to say about masculinity besides the fact that we must
Redefine.
restructure and redefine the way we teach masculinity.
We'll start the masculinity reform.
A
just the
masculinity
two of us.
reform, masculinity,
Toxic masculinity reform.
revolution.
Yes.
Yeah, important stuff. All right, that's all we have for today. At least topic wise, we still have to do our MMM. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah.
Anything you have?
I went out and I saw this movie on Thursday. It was so holy crap! It was so funny. It's called Hell of a Suburb. When I read it, I thought it was gonna be like a serious thriller. I kind of went. I went out with a friend, and we watched it. We were watching it, and we're like, we thought this was a scary movie, and we're just sitting there, laughing our asses off. We're like, why is this so unserious? It's about these kids
Yeah.
going to summer camp, and it's very unserious. It's like it's set in 2005 or six or something, and like there's these quippy or quirky, witty jokes that are super stupid. Also, there was this lady laughing in front of us super loud. That made the experience a lot better too. But there was like these stupid jokes that are so funny. And it ends up being like a summer camp. There's a killer on the loose, sort of
Classic summer camp, yeah.
but it's still very funny because these kids are so silly and goofy. I recommend watching that if you can. It's in theaters. It's called Hell of a Summer. One of the guys of Stranger Things, I think his name is Finn Wolfhard or Wolfharding.
Wolfarting.
Finn Wolfhard. He directed and produced it, and it was pretty funny. I really, really liked it. It was really I always liked that because it was really surprising that it was a good movie. So yeah, plot twist in the end was kind of funny. Yeah, take out your friends and watch that if you can.
Yes, indeed. I don't have an MMM, but
Man, you never got anything.
I have an experience that I liked.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Wow.
Sorry.
Wow. I have an experience that I liked. I went on a solo hike, which I hadn't gone solo hiking in years. And I went to Yosemite to this waterfall hike. And it was kind of nice to just do the whole hike in silence. There was barely anybody else on that trail because it's not a very popular waterfall hike. But yeah, it was just so nice to just get there, put my beer under the river, put a rock on top of it so it would cool down, and just like lay down and relax. Mm-hmm. It was kind of nice to enjoy my own company. It was fun.
It's always nice.
Yes. Yeah, I don't really have a lot of MMMs. I don't watch a lot of movies.
Stuff. No, I don't either. The last time I went to go watch a movie in theaters was Interstellar in December. It just got re-released. Before that, it was like earlier that year in July. I can't even remember the last time before that. I don't go to the movies to watch movies anymore.
Yeah,
it's hard, bro. Like, it's such a commitment. $15, $20 movie tickets? You're crazy, bro.
Plus, if you get hungry, then
yeah, dude. Like, I went and we were like, "Do we want to get snacks?" And she got like something, and I was like, "Don't want it." I was like, "I really don't even want anything."
Yeah,
like,
no,
it's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
So,
thank you guys for tuning in to our episode of Toxic Masculinity.
Thank you. Please take everything that we've talked about into consideration.
Yes.
Help us start the reform.
And if you're a parent and you have kids, educate yourself not from us, but I guess from us too, but just educate yourself about proper ways to teach your kids about gender, as well as the ways you should not teach your kids about gender, because that's really where it begins. It begins in childhood. Yeah, those are critical years. 1 to 6
for the way we as humans create schemas and mental representations of what we should and should not do. Yeah. So, thank you guys again, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Yes. Have a good day. Bye.